I'm 22 years old, studying business at Large State University here. Junior year, and I need to take required gender studies elective. Sign up for Women in Society course taught by Professor Diane. She has mixed reviews online, but it fits my schedule perfectly. First day of class, and Professor Diane introduces herself to everyone. She is maybe 45 years old and very enthusiastic about the subject. Says this class will challenge our assumptions about gender and society. Says we need to unlearn patriarchal conditioning we have internalized since birth. She explains her grading system, which includes participation and discussion heavily. Says 30% of grade is participation in class discussions weekly. Says she values critical thinking and engagement with the material presented. Sounds reasonable enough. And I plan to participate actively in discussions. Class is about 30 students with maybe 10 men and 20 women. Professor Diane says she is glad to see some men taking class. Says men need feminist education more than women do because of privilege. Says she hopes the men will listen and learn instead of arguing. First few weeks go fine, and lectures are about feminist history. She talks about suffrage movement and second-wave feminism and progress made. I take notes and participate when called on during class discussions. She seems fair and knowledgeable about the historical material she presents. Around week 4, we start discussing wage gap and gender discrimination. Professor Diane says women make 77 cents for every dollar men make. I raise my hand and mention that gap narrows significantly when accounting factors. Say when you control for hours worked, an experience gap is much smaller. She looks annoyed and says that argument is patriarchal propaganda. Basically says the wage gap is real and exists because of systemic discrimination. I try to explain the statistical nuance, but she cuts me off. Says we need to move on and calls on someone else instead. Notice she gives me look like I said something offensive to her. Feel uncomfortable, but figures she just disagreed with my point respectfully enough. My friend Marcus, who is also in class, texts me after saying that was tense. I say, yeah, but healthy debate is part of college, right? So, no worries. Next class, we discuss sexual assault statistics on college campuses. Professor Diane cites the 1 in 5 women statistic as fact. I raise my hand and mention that study has been widely criticized methodology. Explain that the survey asked about regretted drunk sex, not just assault. She interrupts me and says I am rape apologist defending sexual violence. I say no. I am just pointing out the study is flawed. She says questioning assault statistics is textbook example of male privilege silencing women. Tells me that my comments are harmful to survivors in the class. I feel embarrassed and defensive because that was not my intention at all. Just wanted to have factual discussion about the statistics being cited. She moves on, but I notice several students looking at me uncomfortably. One girl near me actually moves her seat away during the class. Marcus texts me after class saying that Professor Diane went too far. Says calling me rape apologist for citing research is unprofessional and unfair. I agree, but decide to be more careful about when I speak up. Do not want to be labeled as problem student or make class hostile. Few weeks later, we get our first essay grades back from midterm. I wrote about biological differences in career choices between genders, cited peer-reviewed research about interests and preferences driving some gaps, thought it was well-researched, and made strong arguments backed by evidence. Get my essay back, and it is a C- grade. Professor Diane's comments say my arguments perpetuate harmful gender stereotypes. Basically says I am using pseudoscience to justify discrimination against women in workplace. Says I need to engage more critically with feminist theory in future work. I am shocked because I cited legitimate published research from universities. My writing is solid, and arguments are clearly structured with evidence. Go to her office hours to ask about the grade I received. She says my essay showed I have not internalized the course material. Says I am still operating from patriarchal framework that justifies oppression. Tell her I cited peer-reviewed studies and made evidence-based arguments. She says not all research is valid and some perpetuates harmful ideologies. Ask her what I could have done differently to get better grade. She says I should have centered feminist theory instead of challenging it. Says the point of the class is to learn feminism, not argue against it. Tell her I thought academic discourse involves questioning and debating ideas. She says men questioning feminism is not the same as legitimate academic discourse. Says when men challenge feminism, it is usually about protecting their privilege. Tell her that seems like unfair generalization based on gender, not argument quality. She says that is exactly the kind of thing she means and ends meeting. Leave her office frustrated and confused about how to succeed in class. Marcus also got C on his essay even though his was different topic. We compare notes and realize we are the only men who got below B. All the women in class got A's and B's, even ones with weaker arguments. Another guy in class named Devin also got C on his essay too. The three of us start comparing our experience in the class so far. We all raised questions or disagreements with Professor Diane at some point. She has been cold or dismissive toward us ever since we spoke up. Devin says he is worried about his GPA because he needs scholarship, says he cannot afford to get C in this required course for degree. Marcus says his parents will be upset if he gets C in elective class. I say we should document everything and be careful going forward with her. Next class, Professor Diane announces we will discuss toxic masculinity concept. Says toxic masculinity is root cause of most violence and social problems. Says men are socialized to be aggressive and dominant, which harms everyone. Lecture is heavily one-sided and does not acknowledge any nuance at all. Devin raises his hand and asks if there are positive aspects of masculinity. Professor Diane says question itself reveals he has not been listening to lectures. Says trying to defend masculinity is exactly what toxic masculinity does. Devin says he just wanted to clarify, and she tells him to stop interrupting. I see Devin's face turn red, and he looks embarrassed in front of everyone. He does not say anything else for rest of the class period. After class, he tells us he is done participating because not worth it. Says he will just sit quietly and try to get through the semester. Few weeks later, we have second essay due about patriarchy and institutions. I write very carefully, avoiding any argument that could be seen as challenging. Cite only feminist authors and frame everything from feminist perspective. Exactly. Basically, write what I think she wants to hear, not what I actually think. Get the essay back and it is a B- this time. Her comments say it is improvement, but still shows resistance to material. Says, my writing lacks authentic engagement with feminist ideas presented in class. Realize she can tell I'm just regurgitating her views without believing them. Marcus writes essay that genuinely engages with feminism and gets C++. Devin writes essay that directly agrees with everything she said and gets B. The pattern is clear that we are being graded more harshly than women. Even when we write exactly what she wants, we still get lower grades. One of the women in class named Jessica gets an on essay. Read her essay when she shows it to me, and it is honestly mediocre grammar issues and weak arguments, but she agrees with Professor Diane completely. Ask Jessica if she thinks grading seems fair in the class so far. Jessica admits she has noticed the men get lower grades consistently than women. Says she thinks Professor Diane is harder on men because of the patriarchy. Says men need to work harder to overcome their privilege and biases. Tell her that is literally grade discrimination based on gender, which is illegal. Jessica says she does not think Professor Diane would do that intentionally. Maybe the men just are not understanding the material as well. Point out that I literally have higher GPA than her in every other class. She gets defensive and says GPA does not mean I understand feminism better. Final exam is coming up and I am stressed about my grade. Currently have B- average because of the 2 essay grades dragging down. Need at least B in class to keep my scholarship for next semester. Study hard and prepare thoroughly for the exam, covering all material. Final exam is a mix of multiple choice and short essay questions. Multiple choice is straightforward about facts from lectures and readings accurately. Short essay questions ask us to analyze scenarios from feminist perspective clearly. Write carefully and cite course material extensively to support every point. Get exam back and I got C++ on it. Overall multiple choice section I got 95%, which is nearly perfect score. Short essay section, I got 65%, which tanked my overall exam grade. Professor Diane's comments say essays lack depth and critical feminist analysis. Marcus got similar result with high multiple choice and low essay grade. Devin also got high multiple choice, but failed short essay section completely. We compare our essay answers, and they are detailed and cite course material. Women in class are posting on group chat about getting A's and high B's. Jessica got a minus on exam, and her essay answers are shorter than mine. Another woman named Ashley got it, and her essays have factual errors in them. The grading is clearly biased, and we have documented evidence of pattern. Now decide we need to file formal complaint with the department about this. Devin is nervous about filing complaint because worried about retaliation from her. Marcus says we have to do something because this is affecting our GPA. I say we have evidence and the university has process for grade appeals. We schedule a meeting with department chair to discuss our concerns about grading. Department chair is a man named Dr. Patterson, who has been teaching for 30 years. We bring all our graded work and show him the pattern clearly. Explain that we are consistently graded lower than women for same quality work. Show him examples where women got A's for work worse than our C's. Dr. Patterson looks at everything carefully and takes notes during meeting. Asks if we have raised concerns with Professor Diane directly about grades. Tell him we have, and she said we are not engaging properly with feminism. Explain that she has called us rape apologists and defenders of patriarchy in class. He asks if we have witnesses to these comments she made publicly. Several students in the class are willing to verify what she said to us. Dr. Patterson says he will look into this and review the grading patterns, says he takes grade discrimination very seriously and will investigate thoroughly. Few days later, Professor Diane sends emails saying final grades are posted. I get B- in the class, which hurts my GPA significantly. Marcus gets C+, and Devin gets C, which affects their scholarships. We are all frustrated and angry about the unfair grading we experienced. Dr. Patterson contacts us saying he has reviewed all grades from class, says he found statistically significant pattern of men receiving lower grades consistently, says even when controlling for quality of work, men average full letter grade lower, says this constitutes potential gender discrimination in grading practices clearly. He says the university is opening formal investigation into Professor Diane's grading, says they will review her grading patterns from previous semesters as well, says if investigation confirms discrimination, our grades will be adjusted retroactively, tells us we did right thing by bringing this forward with evidence. Professor Diane posts on her social media about being investigated for grades, says male students filed complaint because they cannot handle being challenged intellectually, says this is textbook example of male fragility and resistance to feminism, says the university is caving to patriarchal pressure by investigating her teaching. Her post goes viral among feminist academics who support her online. They say investigating feminist professor for grading men lower is attack on women, say men cannot handle being held accountable in academic settings by women. Nobody mentions that we have evidence of clear grading discrimination based on gender. Investigation takes about 6 weeks, with committee reviewing all her grade records. They interview students from multiple semesters about their experiences with her. Pattern emerges that she has been grading men lower than women for years, even controlling for participation and essay quality. Men consistently score lower. Committee also finds evidence she made disparaging comments about male students regularly. Several women in the class confirmed she said things like, men are less capable. One student recorded a lecture where she said men should not be in university. The evidence is overwhelming that she discriminated against male students systematically. Investigation concludes that Professor Diane violated university grading policies clearly. She discriminated against male students based on gender in grading and treatment. Committee recommends she be placed on probation and required to undergo training. Also recommends all male students in her classes get grades reviewed and adjusted. University sends us letters saying our grades are being changed based on findings. My B- becomes a minus after adjustment for discrimination in grading. Marcus's C+ becomes B+, and Devin's C becomes B- after review. All of us are relieved that our GPA will not be permanently damaged. Professor Diane is furious about the findings and writes long appeal letter. argues that feminist pedagogy requires holding men accountable for patriarchy differently, says grading men harder is legitimate teaching method to address privilege imbalance, says university is undermining feminist education by punishing her for this approach. Her appeal is denied and she is placed on probation for a year. She is required to have all future grades reviewed by department chair. She is also required to take training on bias and discrimination in grading. She posts on social media that she is being persecuted for feminist teaching. She frames the investigation as attack on women in academia by entitled men. Says male students weaponize complaint process to silence feminist professor teaching truth. Her supporters online start petition to reinstate her without probation or oversight. Petition gets about 5,000 signatures from academics and activists around country. Local feminist blog writes article defending her and attacking the university decision. Article says holding men accountable through grades is not discrimination. It is pedagogy, says feminist professors should be free to challenge male students more rigorously. Does not mention the evidence of systematic grading discrimination we documented thoroughly. University stands by investigation findings despite public pressure from her supporters, releases statement saying all students deserve fair treatment regardless of gender, says academic freedom does not include right to discriminate in grading practices, says professor. Professor Diane can continue teaching with oversight to ensure fair grading. Next semester, she is still teaching, but with very different approach. Now students report she is much more careful about grading and comments in class. She no longer makes disparaging generalizations about men in her lectures openly. Several men in her new class say they feel they are being graded fairly. Marcus takes another class with her next year to see if things changed. Says she is noticeably more balanced and does not single out male students. Says he got A in the class and grading seemed fair throughout semester. Seems the investigation and oversight actually corrected her discriminatory behavior completely. Devin transfers to different university because he lost his scholarship from the C. Even though grade was adjusted, the damage to his GPA already affected his funding. He is bitter about the whole experience and how it derailed his education. Professor Diane never apologized or acknowledged how her actions hurt students like him. I finished my degree and graduate with decent GPA despite the initial B-. Tell the story to other students to warn them about biased professors. Encourage people to document everything and file complaints when necessary to protect themselves. Feel glad we stood up to discrimination, even though it was a stressful process. Few years later, Professor Diane is denied tenure at the university. She claims it is retaliation for her feminist teaching and files discrimination complaint. University says it is based on her disciplinary record and student complaints over years. She eventually leaves and gets job at smaller college in different state. See her social media, and she is still teaching women's studies at New School. She posts about her martyrdom at previous university and persecution she faced. Frames herself as victim of patriarchal backlash against feminist education. Always never takes responsibility for discriminating against male students based on gender systematically. Think about how she genuinely believed grading men harder was justified pedagogy. Her ideology convinced her that discrimination against men was acceptable in education, cost her tenure and reputation, but she still refuses to admit wrongdoing. All because she could not treat students fairly regardless of their gender identity. Sometimes lowering grades of men who argue is discrimination, not feminist pedagogy. Sometimes treating male students differently based on gender violates university policy clearly. Sometimes formal complaints backed by evidence result in accountability for biased professors. And sometimes professor who discriminates gets annihilated when investigation proves the pattern.
If this confession kept you hooked, make sure to subscribe, like, and share. We share powerful true stories every day that explore the complex realities of life.